Turning now to our focus tonight, FEMA, and specifically its response to Helene in western North Carolina. In recent months, the agency has become a flashpoint of controversy, and some would even say it's become politicized. President Donald Trump ran on fixing the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and recently the head of the department that oversees the agency called for getting rid of it altogether. Now, that's an idea that concerns many local and state leaders who would be asked to do a lot more after disasters to fill FEMA's role. Later in the show, I'll be joined by two of our Spectrum News Washington Bureau reporters who will talk about the changes that could come to FEMA and how that might be received by officials around the country. But first, you might have heard about this 62-page report Republican Congressman Chuck Edwards, the representative for much of western North Carolina in Congress, recently released. It's got ideas to, quote, fix FEMA and speed up Helene recovery in western NC. Now, there's a lot in this report, but it calls for increasing the federal government cost share for major corridors damaged by Helene to 100%, costing the federal government just under $262 million. It also calls for speeding up disaster funding for North Carolina farmers, modernizing the FEMA's IT systems, and simplifying the processes for disaster responses, saying survivors are forced to navigate a confusing array of federal agencies just to find the disaster assistance they are eligible for. There's a lot more in that report, but joining us now is Congressman Edwards, who joins us now from North Carolina. Sir, it's good to see you as always. We just went through some of the main takeaways from that report. I know there's a lot more in there. You met with White House officials to go over this report. Is there anything that White House officials told you that you can expect, that we can expect the Trump administration might act on in this report?
Well, it was a most productive meeting, and I appreciate the fact that President Trump came to Western North Carolina. He made the promise that we would not be forgotten. He appointed me to a special task force to accelerate the recovery in Western North Carolina, and that report is exactly the result of my work for several weeks. In the feedback that I've gotten from constituents and community leaders, uh, it, it certainly was productive in the fact that I had for well over an hour the undivided attention of senior White House officials. They clearly understand the challenges that we have here in Western North Carolina, and they made a commitment to continue to work with me. First of all, in accelerating the payments that are due to local governments and constituents in Western North Carolina.
Yeah, a lot of challenges, and we'll get to those. I want to ask you about, in the report, there's a lot of mention to putting power in the hands of the state and local governments, but there's also requests for more financial assistance from FEMA. So is this report a call to scale back FEMA or increase the use of FEMA?
Well, the report, first of all, is highlighting some financial needs that we still have in Western North Carolina. We certainly could use 100% cost share to fix our major highways, the arteries coming into the region. It also makes several recommendations to streamline FEMA. And yes, I believe that disasters could much more efficiently be handled in the hands of state and local officials that better understand the needs, the topography of the area that has experienced the disaster.
As you know, Congressman, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, recently called on FEMA to be eliminated. Let's just play that soundbite, and I'll get your reaction afterwards.
And we're going to eliminate FEMA. So we've got a lot to do, but it's all good, and we're working hard, and we're going to make sure that we're continuing to do exactly what you promised.
That's great job.
President Trump there at the end saying, that's great job. So do you, Congressman, agree with the Secretary that FEMA should be eliminated?
I applaud the Secretary's challenge that FEMA has to be looked at with great scrutiny and rebuilt. Whether we call it FEMA or whether we use some other acronym, we will need a team of folks in Washington, D.C. that are equipped to assist states in their recoveries from natural disasters. I don't believe we need FEMA at the size and the structure that it is now. There's clearly a bureaucracy there that needs to rebuild. First of all, I fail to see why FEMA is under the umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security. That just doesn't seem to fit. The other thing that I've noticed is there are many different entities in Congress in Washington, D.C. that claim jurisdiction and oversight of FEMA. I think I've counted 5. And if an organization is accountable to 5 oversight entities, then they're really accountable to no one. My preference would be that we would substantially reduce the size of FEMA, come up with a formula to send natural disaster funds to states in the form of a block grant and allow states to administer their own recovery, but there would be a core group of folks inside of FEMA or whatever acronym that we wanted to use that would be there as consultants for those situations where we have states not familiar with particular disasters. We've just simply got to streamline this, and this won't affect rebuilding FEMA won't affect Western North Carolina. At this point, rebuilding FEMA would help better address those future natural disasters.
So, and there is legislation in Congress that would take FEMA out of the Department of Homeland Security, give it more control to the president. What I'm hearing you say, Congressman, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that you would like to see a significant scale back of FEMA, but you do not want to see it eliminated.
We need a core group of folks in Washington, D.C. to consult with states with matters that they may not be familiar with, whether that is called FEMA or whether it's called something else. We need that core group of experienced consultants.
Congressman, in late March, a Smoky Mountain News survey found out of 23 local governments, only 9 had received any funding from FEMA, totaling less than 4% of their needs, meaning 14 had not received any money at all. Look, that was about a month ago, a little less than a month ago. Have you spoken with FEMA, gotten any assurances from FEMA that this federal money is going to be sped up to the communities that need it?
The short answer is yes. I personally spoke with the acting director of FEMA, Mr. Cameron Hamilton, a very constituent-oriented person. He assured me that he had gone directly to the secretary and received the approvals that were necessary to begin processing those checks. I polled some of my local governments just last night and am happy to hear that checks are beginning to show up now. Not at the pace that I would expect. I'll continue to keep the pressure on the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. And that was one of the requests that I made of the White House when I was with their senior staff last week.
Well, Congressman Chuck Edwards, I do really appreciate you taking some extended time to go a little bit more in depth on this. We think it's important. We've heard from a lot of viewers on, what's happening in terms of Helene recovery. Obviously, your FEMA report, and we do hope you'll keep us updated on what you hear from the Trump administration about your report as well.
Most definitely. Thanks for your interest.
Yeah. And by the way, we will post the full interview with Congressman Chuck Edwards. Had to condense it a little bit for the show. We'll do the full interview and we'll put it up on our website, SpectrumLocalNews.com. Time now for our first break. North Carolina is far from the only state paying close attention to the potential changes coming to FEMA. Coming up, we're going to talk with our Spectrum News reporters here in D.C. covering Florida and California, 2 states not immune to disaster. We'll get their view from their states. All that and a lot more coming up on Capitol tonight. We hope you'll stay with us. Welcome back. We're going to continue our focus on FEMA and disaster recovery tonight. About 2 months after Helene hit Western North Carolina, Congress passed billions of dollars in aid to help the state. But across the country in California, where the Los Angeles wildfires hit in January, It's been more than 3 months and Congress hasn't acted. Now, there's a couple reasons for potentially why, and it speaks to just how political disaster recovery has become. Perhaps a warning sign for future disasters. We're going to dive into all of that in just a minute, but first, this report from Washington reporter Cassie Simeon.
When major disaster strikes, the federal government always steps in. But California Democrats say the state has been burned by Republican leaders in Washington, who have failed to approve any financial assistance after wildfires destroyed Los Angeles County communities earlier this year.
I can't imagine that other places in the country would face this delay if they were experiencing what California's experienced. I would never do this to one of my fellow countrymen who was suffering this kind of thing.
A Spectrum News analysis of major disasters in the last 20 years reveals just how different the federal response this time has been. In 2005, after Hurricane Katrina made landfall, it took just 5 days for Congress to pass a $10 billion emergency aid package. And in 2017, only 22 days passed before Congress approved $15.3 billion in aid for Hurricane Harvey relief. A political battle over emergency aid did erupt after Superstorm Sandy devastated the Northeast in 2012. Congress needed 67 days to pass $9.7 billion in initial aid and another 24 days to pass $51 billion in assistance. But more than 100 days after the wildfires tore through Los Angeles County, Congress has not taken up wildfire aid for California. As in the case of Sandy 12.5 years ago, the communities needing help lean Democratic, and the opposition to their request for help is coming from Republicans. This time, Republicans want to attach strings to the assistance.
I think there should probably be conditions on that aid. That's my personal view.
I think squeezing their federal funds, making sure they don't get funds, putting strings on them.
Something Democrats have said is a non-starter.
We will not support conditions to disaster assistance.
Some political analysts blame the partisanship that now grips the nation's politics.
They take something like disasters, which are humanitarian concerns, and now we're saying, well, no, maybe not. That's also an opportunity to negotiate. And for you to get aid, we need something in return.
All right, let's go more in depth now. Cassie joins us now in studio. Cassie, you cover California. My colleague Karina Capabianca, you cover Florida. Cassie, 5 days to get federal aid after Hurricane Katrina. You think about that now, it's pretty unimaginable. What are the conditions that some of these Republicans are looking for to get to tie with disaster aid for California?
I mean, the short answer is they want California to change some of its policies, right? You heard from Rick Grinnell in my stories talking about squeezing California, making sure they didn't get federal aid. One of the changes that he is proposing is getting rid of the California Coastal Commission. That is an organization within the state that was created by voters to protect the coastline. That has nothing to do with fire aid, fire mitigation, trying to prevent wildfires in the future. And that's why Democrats are so angry. They're saying, listen, we can try to find ways to better prevent wildfires or better predict them, but these conditions have absolutely nothing to do with getting people that have been, lives destroyed by these fires, getting them the aid that they need.
California, a solid Democratic state. Florida now has pretty much become a solid Republican state. You're not hearing those conversations, stipulations for any aid in Florida?
Yeah, no, not really at this time. And really, when you think about it, depending on how this unfolds with FEMA and some of the proposals that we've heard to dismantle it or have states, more in depth in their response to it, I think it's really going to depend on how well these states are equipped as far as resources and staffing.
I mean, the three biggest states are probably Florida, Texas, California. Three states also that deal with disasters on a regular basis, natural disasters. Could Florida handle responses to natural disasters if FEMA was out of the equation?
Well, it's interesting because the Florida Division of Emergency Management leader was on Capitol Hill testifying at a hearing, and even he said that there's going to need to be some federal assistance or some federal support, even for states like Florida that are more well-equipped than others.
Yeah, and there is legislation in Congress that would change how FEMA works. We'll talk about that right after the break. Stay with us, Capitol Tonight. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us here on Capitol Tonight. I'm Ruben Jones in our D.C. studio this evening. We've spent most of the show talking about FEMA, talking about disaster recovery. Why? Because they are a big focus in Congress right now. There's even talk of getting rid of FEMA altogether. For more on all of this, we're joined by my colleagues, Cassie Simeon, Karina Capabianca. Karina, you cover Florida. Cassie, you cover California, two states that know natural disasters really well. Look, before the break, we were talking about FEMA. Karina, there is legislation, bipartisan legislation, that would change how FEMA operates. Tell us real quick what that would do.
Yeah, so it's a proposal by Jared Moskowitz, a Democrat from Florida, and Byron Donalds, a Republican from Florida. And the goal is to make FEMA a cabinet-level independent agency. There was a similar proposal last session, but didn't seem to go anywhere. And I think right now you're just waiting for leadership to sort of take their cues from the Trump administration as to what exactly they want.
Any signs of whether there's support for this in Congress?
Well, right now it just looks like those two as sponsors, so no more co-sponsors that I've seen up until now.
Cassie, is this sort of a compromise? I mean, when you took it, we had the beginning of the show, we played sound from Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who said, we're going to get rid of FEMA, or plan to get rid of it. Is this sort of a compromise of, hang on a second, we can change FEMA, we don't need to get rid of it?
Well, I mean, I spoke to a lot of my California Democrats who have, of course, been begging Congress to act for wildfire relief. And I said, what do you make of Kristi Noem's suggestion of getting rid of FEMA altogether? And every single Democrat that I spoke with said, this is a horrendous idea. Obviously, California better equipped to handle some of these natural disasters than these smaller states. We can handle most of the financial burden. Of course, we still need federal support, but a lot of these smaller states would be decimated. And so one thing to remember is that FEMA used to be an independent agency before 9/11, before the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. So now I think while we haven't seen that many members of Congress come out to support this bill just yet, I do think there is an appetite to reform FEMA, make those changes, and move it out from under that DHS umbrella.
I mean, look, there are valid arguments, obviously, to put some of these powers in the hands of state and local governments, that maybe to get rid of some of the bureaucracy. But the concern, I imagine, from a lot of these local governments and state governments is, okay, where's the money coming from? Are we going to have the money? And what powers will we have? What will the federal government be doing? I imagine there is concern there.
Yeah, and I mean, it goes back to the whole staffing issue, right? When you look at a state like California, like Florida, of course, they have better equipped, natural disaster staff, how to mitigate, how to handle cleanup. But these smaller states don't have that. And so what they need in these huge natural disasters is a team of both federal and state, employees who know how to handle a disaster, know how to handle this cleanup, especially when you're talking about a lot of this toxic waste that is left behind by these hurricanes and fires. I mean, you need to have staff that are well informed and well equipped to handle these things. And if you get rid of FEMA at the federal level, a lot of these state employees are not going to get the training they need or know how to handle these disasters when they come about. And they're coming up more and more.
3+ months, no federal disaster aid from Congress for the LA wildfires, which got so much attention when they hit in January. Cassie Simeon, thank you so much. Karina Capabianca, appreciate your time as well. And we thank you for your time at home. We're going to have a lot more tomorrow night on Capitol Tonight. We'll be back here in D.C. We'll see you then. Take care.
Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, and click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.